Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzle show. Yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzle show. Yeah.
Matt, where are you, Matt?
All right. Welcome to the Matt and Rizzle show. I'm your host, Rizzle, and I'll also be your co-host today, Rizzle. Matt totally rugged me. No, just kidding. Matt is doing important real life stuff, and this actually works out all right because I'm off next week, and so I will be promptly rugging Matt in return next week. So we'll see how that goes. I'm sure he'll do great. So the question occurred to me, since I'm sort of recording a solo episode on the fly, which I basically never do, is what the fuck am I going to talk about on my solo episode on the fly? And so I don't know. I think I'm going to zoom out and do some big picture stuff, and we'll see if I can fill an entire episode just rambling on and on here. But this is good for me to sort of get some thoughts out too. That I've been thinking about for a while. So really, top of mind recently has always been, honestly, two things: is decentralization and interoperability. And I feel like those are things within our space that are constantly under attack. And if those things sort of fall or get pushed by the wayside, you know, my sentiment is like, what was the point of all this in the first place? And as time goes on, and time is weird if you've been in this space for a while, it moves, I feel like both fast and slow at the same time. And I feel like a lot of the people coming into the space through no fault of their own don't realize or grasp that was such a central focus of Web3, NFTs, crypto, whatever you want to call, the conglomeration of all these things in the very early days. And of course, there were always, wherever there's money, there's always like opportunists and Ponzi schemes and people trying to get a chunk of whatever's out there for themselves. But when NFTs in particular came up, you could really see this sort of beacon of light, enter the scene where, there was actually a vehicle for crypto to provide legitimate opportunities for creators and artists and builders and, people around the world who have historically been unable to monetize their skill sets, or were in a place where their skill sets aren't appreciated, or they had payment situations that were unresolvable with the old ways of simply getting paid for your craft. And so it was so exciting very early on in the scene when you could see that this solved like a very real world problem. NFTs in particular made it all click for me when all these artists came into the scene from everywhere around the world, and it was seamless. If I wanted to scoop up a piece of art, it was so cheap, back then. For a couple dollars you could buy art from someone you've never heard of all the way across the world and build a connection with them. And it would seem like the internet would make this possible inherently, but it doesn't, right? Like it's sort of, the internet itself sort of became a walled garden over time, where everyone's sort of regionalized, and sort of held in check by, whatever the restraints are for that particular geographical location. And so the ability to sort of seamlessly circumvent that, not in a malicious way, but in a way that actually provided real benefit to people, was extremely exciting. It's like I feel like something that I've been, personally looking for, some path forward to make like a big difference or impact in the world. And I'm like, yo, this is it, right? This is the thing that can actually, change the game for a lot of people on like a large scale. And here we are, we're all part of it. And I think that was, whether people are consciously thinking about decentralization as much as I am, I would doubt it. But I do think that general vibe and ethos, carried through for a very long time. And so, and I think interoperability sort of goes hand in hand with that, right? When we're like zooming in a little bit further on decentralization and the creative process, you sort of open the floodgates to creators around the world to create things that can be used around the world. And around the world also in Web3 means the metaverse and stuff like that. So I feel like those things go very much hand in hand, and that's what I think this space has gotten away from. Maybe I need to walk that back a little bit. I don't feel like the core people who have built this space have gotten away from this, but I do feel like, for better or for worse, or if it's just companies and venture capitalists just doing what they do, have come in and tried to monetize and sort of silo the space and the ability to do things in the same way that was done with the internet, that I feel like was almost a step backwards. We can trace one of the big events when I was I don't even know how old I was the whole like Napster fiasco with Metallica and everything. And Napster sort of scratched the surface of something that we haven't really been able to get back to since then, aside from like stuff like the Pirate Bay and stuff which has always been out there, but is truly decentralized knowledge, technology, art, music, that kind of thing. And the flaw with those were that the creators weren't getting paid or recognized sometimes at all. The beauty of what Web3 is that solves that problem instantaneously, and in theory royalties on top of it if we can sort of work that out over the long run, which I think will be fine, honestly, for the creators and the artists. And Matt and I have had that conversation in the past on how I don't think they're the biggest target for creator royalties, but that's a whole nother can of worms. So anyway, I feel like we've sort of gotten away from that as a space, which is why I get agitated and like end up trolling people and everything, because I do feel like if that mentality wins, what was the point of doing this, of like being on this venture this whole time? If the end result is that we all get geographically marginalized and stuck in our boxes, and people can only buy with certain crypto, or can only send things to certain places, or can only transact with certain people who have been vetted by like certain whatever, a truly decentralized and interoperable system of anything. I don't proclaim to be a visionary on how that plays out over the long run. I'm sure there are pros and cons and things that need to be sorted out, but I do believe that there is more good than bad to come from opening up the floodgates of creativity and allowing people around the world to freely transact with each other and express themselves and get paid for what they're good at. And honestly, I've always sort of felt that that's the inevitable course of events. I feel like I've never been a specific blockchain maxi. I have ones that I like more than others, but I do feel like inherently, now that there are blockchains that are pretty much immutable out there, some of these situations take care of themselves, and regulators and people who are trying to push restrictions upon people are sort of playing whack-a-mole, a very, very difficult game of whack-a-mole. And the solution is really to on a grand scale, sort of take a look at this situation and be like, okay, how do we deal with this and incorporate this properly rather than try and stifle it and inhibit societal growth, which I think is what happens if we end up, sort of back in the old ways, being siloed and everything. So I don't know. I feel like we're at a very interesting point in history, especially with AI coming up and everything. A specific point of history in disruption where shit's about to get like real crazy. I've fallen pretty deep into the rabbit hole of AI, and have been playing around with Mid-Journey specifically a lot, but tinkering around with a lot of things as I always do. And I feel like I've gotten pretty good over time at being able to see something. NFTs are like a decent point of reference. But I've done this a few times where I feel like I've been able to identify a thing and be like, dude, this shit is about to disrupt some like real shit. And I don't think we've really even scratched the surface with NFTs and crypto to the extent that we will at some point. But I also feel like there's this like really weird combination of things that's going to come together with all this technology and AI and everything, where the next like 5-10 years are going to get, I don't know, pretty weird, fascinating, hopefully not like horribly dystopian. I think my view on tech in general is that I feel like it's inevitable and it's going to happen. And, our job is to try and use it for more good than bad, right? Like with anything really innovative, there's, a path towards exploiting it, and there's a path towards, using it for something positive. And honestly, that's why I fell in love with the art community within NFTs and crypto. And I've talked on this before, but I was always fascinated with crypto since like 2012 or whatever, particularly for its, the ability to do what I've just been rambling about. But, sticking that with NFTs and getting a bunch of artists in here with a similar vibe, I feel like really changes the game. And I think that changes the game over the long run as well. Like, these are the people who benefit the most, more so than like, these banks and investors and everyone benefit a lot financially. But for a lot of these creators who I believe greatly outnumber them, their lives are being changed daily by this technology and everything. And I don't see that cat being stuffed in the bag, back in the bag. But I think it's about to get real weird with the acceleration of AI, the rapid acceleration of AI and this technology. And you can already see, like, the grifters out there grifting. For a while there, AI art was sort of a novelty. It's also, I mean, I've been tinkering around with it a lot, and I'm not selling anything yet, at least, but people have asked me to, and I feel kind of strange about that, to be honest. And I'm not making any big moves or anything. But you are starting to see people just churn this stuff out at like a really, really high level. And I'm guilty of buying some of this stuff too. In the back of my head, I'm like, I love art. I love independent artists. I love supporting independent artists. You can check my wallet. I've been doing it for years. But also at the end of the day, I'm like, I just like dope looking stuff, and sometimes don't necessarily care where it comes from. Anyway, that's an aside, or maybe not totally an aside, because I guess where I'm going with that is I think a lot of people out there are similar to that. I don't want to say worse than me, but like are more like, I like shiny things, I want it type of mentality, rather than like, this is a very interesting piece of art, I would like to know the context behind it and the artist behind it. A lot of people just want something cool to slap up on their walls, and I'm sure we all know people like that, right? So I don't know, it's going to get weird. Where to go with this ramble? So one of the things that I've been very proud to be a part of over the last several years is the WIP Meetup, which honestly, not to really, well, to sort of pat ourselves on the back, if you zoom out I'm like, the WIP has been this weekly event going on for 3 years now that has literally been championing these ideals for years, not in like a super in your face way, but this is a weekly metaverse event that has been to countless metaverses, has done giveaways and events and showcased NFTs and crypto on all different blockchains, and has been truly agnostic throughout this whole weird journey over the past several years. And that's not to say the WIP hasn't leaned heavily in, certain directions. We've been doing a lot of our events in crypto voxels recently, Monaverse. Some places just lend themselves to being, easier for us to deal with than others, but have always attempted to stay true to the mantra of showcasing cool stuff. And we've had countless speakers on, like I said, from all different projects, viewpoints, blockchains, metaverses over the years to just talk about what cool stuff they're doing. And, I feel like because of that, I've come to appreciate the ethos of decentralization and interoperability even more, especially within the context of creativity and art, because again, I have certain blockchains and projects and things that I like more than others, but I also have to admit to myself that, like, when it all comes down to it, artists are just doing their thing wherever they feel like it and wherever they're most comfortable. And if one thing goes down, there's like another opportunity that pops up somewhere else, and they just keep plugging along and doing their thing, and have actually, I feel like, done a really good job. The artist community within NFTs has done a really good job of diversifying themselves across all different blockchains as well, because I've sort of come from this mentality where I don't trust any of this shit as far as I can throw it within like certain parameters or whatever. So I feel like the artist community, consciously or unconsciously, has done a great job of decentralizing itself within the context of Web3. And it's cool to have been a part of it, not technically as an artist myself, but through the WIP Meetup, and being able to showcase these cool projects and deliver these cool experiences, and really honestly educate myself about the landscape of Web3 and how all of these moving parts fit together over time. I don't know. So it's really exciting for me to be a part of. Honestly, I feel like we've always been sort of fighting this uphill battle with these ideals in hand, but we've also got this tech that like inherently enables these ideals that, I believe when most people understand it at a grassroots level, they really want decentralization and interoperability, but we're being constantly fed these messages and these products that are dope, honestly, by centralized entities and people who do not want interoperability. And there's a lot of incentive to capture that audience and feed them awesome stuff that does not subscribe to that ethos, but will keep you occupied and will make you just as happy or whatever if you don't, truly care about that stuff. So I hope we don't lose the big picture. But honestly, I feel like, this is like what, the billionth bear market or something that I've been a part of. At this point, I'm so entrenched, I don't even really pay attention to the price too much. But I feel like we're at the fun part of the bear market now, where you get to see who's left, right? And everything is pretty transparent at this point. The grifters are grifting hard on the stuff that they've always grifted on, but the artists and the creators and the builders who have always stuck around, or who always intended to stick around, many of them are still here. And I feel like each bear market, we always pick up like a nice, healthy contingency of new people who probably got wrecked, or maybe they were in it for the art, which I feel like is a thing, truly. And we always pick up some cool people along the way to sort of keep marching forward or whatever. So I honestly feel better than ever, which is why I keep like releasing this dumb shit that is too early for its time, but am trying to put things out there that subscribe to this same ethos. And I shouldn't say it's dumb shit. I'm actually very proud of the stuff that I've put out there. But gonna give myself like a quick self shill with the on-chain chain, which is still, Miguel, Sebi, and I are still constantly tinkering with it and working with it and trying to like in conversations with other people, trying to get it worked into things. But I'm like, damn, we were so early with this in the scope of interoperability, and I actually feel so fortunate for the strides that people like Toxam and Jin have made in interoperability recently, because I'm like, shit, dude, this is going to make my life a whole lot easier trying to get these chains everywhere, because in my head I'm like, we give people the file types and they'll be able to convert them and do whatever they want with them, but in actuality, like it's not that simple, right? And all of these quote unquote decentralized metaverses really have needed to be strong armed into living up to that ethos. A lot of them say they're decentralized. They really just run on the same blockchain, or you can buy them on the same blockchain as a lot of the other ones. But if you actually want to take your shit back and forth from all these places, or even your avatar, it's a pretty like clunky process for a lot of places that say they're decentralized. And so again, circling back to like Jin and Toxam, I'm like, yo, these people, and there's others too that I'm sure we'll neglect to mention, but these are some of the people that I'm in the most conversation with, and truly respect that the work that they've put in time and time again to push that ethos forward, because now we're starting to see people open the doors to VRMs. Like, I don't want to say across the board, but like now you were sort of getting to the point where it's like, yo, if you don't accept VRMs, there's a big ass audience out there with like a bunch of VRMs that wants to use them somewhere. Like, this is something you should really strongly consider if you want this big ass audience in your metaverse. And I think that's like a microcosm of how this whole thing ends up unfolding, where you get enough stuff in enough people's hands who are the actual active users and who really care about the end product and being able to use the end product, the more the people designing these things and building these worlds and creating these experiences have to sort of listen to us, right? I don't want a new metaverse to spring up where I have to go buy all new shit. Like, I already have shit, like tons of shit, like so much shit. So I feel like they're helping me out in a lot of ways, but seeing the uphill battle that has been to just get avatars to the point where they are somewhat interoperable across the board has been I don't want to say a battle, but like seriously a very long process. And I think the dominoes are starting to fall in the favor of interoperability, and that's a huge one, honestly. And so with that, I think wearables, hopefully, knock on wood, are up next, which lends itself to, again, on chain, which I think will be recognized and a thing at some point. I feel like, again, way too early and people don't get it. But again, with that same ethos that, you have one thing, you want to be able to use it everywhere. This is the way it should all be. And I hope we see so much more of that. Like, a lot of people are sitting on a lot of wearables that are locked up in their respective platforms and everything. And, who wants that? Like, nobody does, right? But I've been a harsh critic of a lot of these metaverses, rightfully so sometimes. And a lot of people know I've recently decided to work alongside with Monaverse and, do some cool stuff with them. And it's not often that I try to sort of hitch my wagon to another project that isn't my own project. But, I've got to say, I feel comfortable with that team in the sense that they have their head in the right spot. Every meeting that I'm at with them, they're pushing interoperability. They're pushing stuff. They're pushing Monaverse, but they're pushing Monaverse stuff to be able to be used in all the other places as well, as much as humanly possible. And I'm like, shit, well, that was my idea too with these chains. So like, I realize that's not always a straightforward process, but at least our heads are in the right spot. And I also, while I'm on the Monoverse tangent, have to appreciate that they have leaned into me using all interoperable stuff. They didn't really, when I decided to work alongside them, there wasn't really an agenda. It was just like, cool, let's like do really cool stuff together and see what happens. And, I just sort of had to tinker around and fiddle around in there to figure out what was going to work best, and hit on the interoperable avatar thing when we were doing the advent calendar. And I'm just like, dude, this is so fun. And it got super weird, and they embraced that. And I feel like in turn, a lot of weird artists and creators embrace the advent calendar. And I'm like, this is some good shit. This makes me feel really good about the decision to continue to do weird stuff with them. Which I don't know how long I've been rambling here. A long time. I think I can keep going. Because I now I got on like a weird shit vein or whatever here, and I feel like that's another thing that I have learned over time is that and one thing that's always been successful with the WIP is we've seen a lot of like copycat events and things pop up within the context of the metaverse over time, and they all flop. They, or are unsustainable. There's been a lot of companies who come in, and a lot of money dumped into builds for like singular events or like concerts, or something like that is often something they're trying to channel from the real world, or something they're trying to recreate within the context of the metaverse. And I haven't, I sort of fell out of the loop of whatever Facebook is doing these days. But last I checked, which was a little while ago, I may not be current, like I said, but they were like hemorrhaging money trying to, essentially build a metaverse that looked like, a bunch of office buildings and, what are they, the Nintendo Wii characters or whatever. And I'm sure they got more tricks up their sleeve than that. But I feel like if there's anything I've learned over time through pulling off countless metaverse events at this point, not even including the WIP, there's the Meta Olympics and like, a million other things I've been a part of, fashion shows and everything, is that like you can't maintain an audience or an interest at all, honestly, in the metaverse if you aren't like steadily doing something fucking weird or something that people haven't seen before or haven't experienced before, because the novelty of hopping into a metaverse art gallery is awesome at first. But if you're not like an avid art collector or like museum goer in real life, then after you've seen a few art galleries, you've had enough art galleries. And same thing with like cool metaverse builds. It's like once you've seen a couple cool builds that look like something you'd see in real life, it's like, okay, cool, like it's another video game or something like that. And so one of the things that I feel like has been successful for the WIP and for a lot of the events that I've been a part of is to really just keep it as weird as humanly possible. And again, the art community is what we've leaned into and had a big success with, which I feel like is the big underdog or the big unsung hero of this whole movement. Maybe circling back to what I originally started rambling about, like they're the ones who care about this tech. They're the ones who are in it to push it and see what interesting stuff can be done with it, and not just straight up monetize it, cash in, and leave. And what is awesome is that many of these artists who are still with us made enough money or are making enough money doing this within the context of their own belief system and ethos and everything, that I don't want to say they have like fuck you money, but they can continue to support themselves and do what they do, and that's appreciated within the context of the space. And that's the type of vibe I like to get down with and everything. So I don't know where do we go from here. I don't really know, but I know I'm not going anywhere, and I feel like it's getting exciting. If nothing else, when everything gets disrupted and dismantled and the chaos happens, it's cool to at least have an understanding of what is going on, what has led up to this point, have some sort of like, be able to see the big picture of where this is going. And honestly, I feel like the group of people within Web3 who I've always surrounded myself around, I trust them to uphold that moving forward, and honestly feel very grateful to just be a part of this whole ride. I mean, for somehow I'm on a solo podcast now, being Rizzle full time, day in, day out, doing wacky things with like avocados and fire frog firefighters, and it's been a wild ride, but a good one. So like I said in the beginning, I'm actually off last week, which like hardly ever happens. So a good time for a solo episode here to sort of tie me off for a week. I will miss y'all at the WIP. If there is one in my absence next week, we'll be here tomorrow, January 12th for another cool one in Spatial with IRX Labs, which will be pretty dope. I don't think a lot of our audience has been in Spatial before, again, which is cool. We're going to uncharted territory, at least mostly for our crew. And actually, if any of you are listening to this now who are planning on attending the WIP tomorrow, it may be worth your while to just hop into Spatial really quick. I think there's like an email verification in order to get in there. And that's like one less step of something you have to do tomorrow when there's like a million links and things going around concurrently. So that's pretty good. I have no idea how much I rambled for, but I feel like a pretty good amount of time for me to just be randomly riffing and rambling by myself. So love y'all very much. Appreciate you listening to this podcast, and make fun of Matt for not being here. Let's see. Anything else? This is where I check with Matt. I'm like, yo, Matt, did we forget about anything? I don't know. Probably. Shout out to the WIP crew who really has been helping me and Matt, and I feel like all of us stay true to a lot of the things that we've believed in this whole time. And I'll just rattle them off real quick. Sandy Meows, It's Carolina Duh, Foxy Yoga, Easy, Paradox Show, Dragonate, Conwolf, Brookhawk, Fabiana, Patricia, Johan, Matthias, and I also throw Matt in there, even though he rugged me today. So love you all very much. See you in a couple of weeks, or at the WIP tomorrow first, and maybe on Friday. But otherwise, if you don't see me and you're shouting Rizzle into the metaverse 3 times, go find Matt instead, at least for a week. All right, later, y'all.